All right, let's take a few questions. Anything you'd like to ask? It may be about youth ministry, young people, church ministry in general. It may be a personal thing. You know, sometimes I think the great struggles that we all fight are not with others, they're with ourself. Somebody said the greatest enemy you have is the person you look at in the mirror every morning. I think there's a lot of truth in that. And so you may have something that would just be a help to you personally, your own personal walk and growth. And Brother Eddie Lapina and I are very happy to be with you and look forward to answering a few questions. So somebody get us started. Anything you'd like to ask? Great question. Sure. Resources for youth ministry. I'll let Brother Eddie speak to this because I know they publish a great deal. Crown Christian Publications, we've tried through the years to put out a lot of resources that will be helpful. For example, and here's the thing I learned early on. Resources can be adapted to teenagers even if they are not written to teenagers. You see, one of the great dangers with resources is the mentality that if it doesn't say teen on the front of it, it's no good for them. I think young people need the same thing their parents need. They need the Word of God. And so anything that gets them into the Word of God is a resource you ought to look at for your young people. So, for example, Pastor Sexton has written, I think, almost 40 books now that have all been adapted into Sunday school curriculum. They're 13 weeks long. I remember the first time I ever taught lessons to our teenagers years ago when I first started working with the young people. Pastor was with the young people at the time. We were between youth directors. By the way, that's a great thing to do. If you're a pastor and you're between youth workers and not sure what to do, step into it yourself. The pastor pastors all the people. Peter was supposed to feed the lambs as well as the sheep. And I've always respected Pastor in that. He's been willing to step in any time and not be intimidated by being with the teenagers. And I remember he was working with the teenagers. We were between youth directors, and he said, I want you to come in. I want you to help me for the summer. I didn't realize at the time. I was too stupid to realize what he was doing, but he was seeing if I could do it. And by the way, that's a very wise thing. Start with short-term assignments. Don't ask somebody to help you for life. They may not be good for life. Give them a 6-week assignment, see how they do. And I said, well, how can I help you? He said, well, I want you to help me organize the activities, and I want you to teach the Bible lesson. And, of course, I look back on it now and realize he wrote the Bible lessons. If anybody could have taught them, he could have taught them. But he was trying to teach me and bring me along. And I remember the first series of lessons that I had to teach was the series that he's written on the Christian home, which, by the way, is a powerful series on the family. And there's a lesson on teenagers and children, but there's a whole lesson on how to be a good wife. There's a whole lesson on being a good mother, on being a good father. And I remember, I was young, I remember looking at those lessons and thinking, the pastor just didn't understand. Teenagers don't relate to this. I was the one that didn't understand. I learned one of the most valuable lessons of my life in that 13 weeks, and I learned this, that all of God's Word applies to young people. You just have to work at the application. So I learned to take a lesson on motherhood and say to teenage girls, what kind of woman you want to be when you grow up? And fellas, what kind of woman you want to marry? Someday you want to have a family. What kind of woman do you want to be the mother of your children? Here are the qualities. Here are the characteristics. Here are the things that ought to be present. It was good for me. And so what we do in our church and in our youth ministry is we don't have teen lessons. Matter of fact, we've challenged our young preachers, don't try to be a youth preacher, be a Bible preacher. If you're a Bible preacher, you can preach to anybody. And so what we do, we take the same series of lessons from 7th grade through adults. And everybody in our church family studies the same series at the same time. Now, the reason we've done that is so families interact with one another. So over lunch, moms and dads know exactly what their teenagers studied this morning, and they can have a good conversation about it. So the Sunday school curriculum is available. We have family devotional guides. This Christian Life Journal that all your young people just got, I think is a great resource. It's got all the elements in it. Friendship, soul winning, prayer, scripture memory, Bible reading, sermon notes, calendar for youth events. It's all there. It's just a matter of adapting it to what you have. We have a notebook on how to start and conduct public school Bible clubs called Teens for Christ clubs. And in that beginner notebook are duplicable lessons. They're copyrighted, but we've given permission for churches to copy them. And once you use all of those, we have enough Bible lessons, master copies that could be copied and used, I think, for 7 years now without repeating lessons, depending on how frequently you meet. And some youth leaders have decided to use those in their youth department, not just in a school meeting. So there are resources available, and I hope you'll avail yourself of them. Brother Eddie, speak to that because I know you all have a lot of great things out.
First of all, I like the question, because usually that question is not asked by youth workers. The problem with most youth workers is because of their age and their they're in their early 20s. They know everything there is to know about youth. And I remember Brother Hiles telling me that I didn't one time. And I was 23 years old, and he said, Eddie, he said, one thing you'll learn when you turn 30 is how stupid you were at 23. And I was very offended with that until I turned 30. But I encourage youth workers to read like there's no tomorrow. Find resources out there. Study. You got to look hard to find them, and they're out there. There's a bunch of them. Go online and look up everything that they sell here from First Baptist Prepare Now Resources. It's called, and it's just a renaming of House Publications. And there's quite a few resources. I've not been diligent in producing a lot myself. I just had a series of 3 books come out on the philosophy of youth work. They just got delivered as I was walking out the door yesterday. So I'm a little bit behind. In fact, a lot of it behind myself. And our youth directors, we're encouraging them to write. They got some brilliant young men there that are working with our teenagers, and they're very good writers. So we're going to be producing a whole lot more in the next few years, but there's a lot out there. Counseling Youth by McDonald is one of the best resources for counseling young people out there, and but you're going to have to look to find them. They're out there. Capacey has quite a lot listed. Email me. I'll send you a lot of great books to have a whole reading list that you ought to read, and I can send those to you.
Very good. We spoke to a group of young people this week about good books for them, and that's something we could make available to you as well. I think you ought to build a library for your teenagers and teach them to read. I think that's very important. Pastor has a great recommended book list. It's on our website for your study and preparation, and so you may want to look at that as well. Great question. All right, something else. Yes, sir. The question is, how do you get young people involved with missions? I'd like for Eddie in just a moment to comment on mission trips. I don't know about you, but mission trips changed my life. I mean, the first time I ever left the continental United States, it was an eye-opening thing to me. And they do a great job with that. They take a lot of mission trips. He personally has taken a lot of youth groups on missions, and so I want him to talk about that. But on a regular basis, one of the things we do is, number one, we try to get missionaries with teenagers. They've got to meet them. They've got to realize they're not people on paper. They're real human beings. Now, with the technology today, you don't have to wait for them to come to you. You can get to them. I commented on this yesterday, but we just Skyped with a missionary family in our teen department a few weeks ago, and we had fun doing it. Our kids enjoyed it, and they got acquainted with people in a part of the world that many of them will never visit in person. So use the technology and try to get them acquainted. When they pass through, when missionaries pass through your church, they may not always preach in the service or even testify in the service. You know, we support so many missionaries, and I know they do as well. It's hard to even give all of them, adequate time to be with the church family. But they could be in Sunday school classes. So why not invite them to be your special guest? We have a lady from China that'll be with our teenagers this Sunday, and I'm excited about it. And we'll have a lot of fun with it, but I want them to get acquainted with them. And then on a practical note, when you can't be with the missionaries, there still should be a regular connection that teenagers have with your missionary families. And the best way we've found to do that is we spotlight a different missionary every Sunday. So every Sunday we read a report from our missionary families. And by the way, we don't just take their latest missions letter, which came 3 months ago, and read stale news. Here's what we do. It's all about preparation. A week in advance, we say to either a youth worker or a teenager, and I love using a teenager, let a teenager do it. They will do it. But we say to a person, look, for the next week, I want you to email this person, call this person, correspond with them, find out what's going on so you can give us an updated report. Then when somebody stands up in front of the youth group next Sunday morning, they're giving something fresh. Hey, look, I just talked to the Johnsons on Friday night, and they just had 20 people saved, and here's 2 or 3 things they asked us to pray about. Pastor talked about this yesterday, nothing being dynamic till it's specific. It's not enough for us to just say, let's pray for all the missionaries. No. Let's take a missionary this week, and let's let Tim research it for a week and report on it next Sunday. And so getting that specific about it, I think on a weekly basis will help. And then mission trips. Let's hear a little bit about that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, the great question, too. Back up just a little bit. I remember growing up at First Baptist and hearing missionaries speak in church. And my opinion from a kid going to a fundamental Baptist church, my opinion of missionaries wasn't that high. I figured if you weren't good enough to do it in the United States, God sent you to the mission field. It's kind of how I felt. And God started really working in my heart. I've been working with our kids, and a lot of kids called to preach, but very few called to the mission field. And it wasn't what I was emphasizing. It's what Brother Pauley's talking about. You got to emphasize it. I wasn't emphasizing. So I talked to Brother Howes about it, and he said, "Yeah." We said, "You need to take a missions trip." I said, "Okay." He said, "I want you to go and take the kids to Monterrey, Mexico, to the mission field where Brother Tommy Ashcraft is." I did not know Brother Ashcraft. I'd heard of him. I'd never heard him speak. And so we went by bus. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And you think I was really stupid. I'll tell you how stupid it was. I did it twice. And no joke. But it was, once we got there and realized Brother Ashcraft was a phenomenal preacher, an excitable guy, had an awesome ministry, and our kids started winning souls. We'd practiced, learned the Spanish plan of salvation, and we started winning souls in the Spanish language. And when our kids were standing there winning people to Christ, reading the Spanish off a card, knowing the Spanish, because we spent all the entire school year in our Spanish class at high school where they had to learn the plan of salvation. And so then in our youth meetings on Sunday night, we went through that, and then for 3 or 4 weeks before the mission trip, we drilled them on it. And when you're standing there and you're winning somebody to Christ in another language and you see tears coming down their eyes, it was electrifying. And after the first night of soul winning, we went back to the church. Our kids wouldn't go to bed. They were just jazzed. I mean, wired. And that we came back from that trip, and we had, I think, out of the 25 kids I took, I think we had 4 of them surrender to the mission field. And in fact, one of our boys on that second trip I took, one of our boys that was on that trip has now just led a whole team to Peru, and just took off 3 weeks ago. And it wasn't the books that I read. It was getting there on the trip, planning a trip, and getting the kids there. A couple quick things about that, about a missions trip. And the way I did them, Brother Tommy Ashcraft's I went to, I think I've taken 7 of them, 1 to the Philippines, several to Mexico City. And our youth directors have taken them to Jamaica and a few other places since. But one of the things that when I was on the trips that I talked to Brother Tommy Ashcraft and Brother Kevin Wynn about, that I do it a little bit different than most groups, is we allow a couple days in there for tourist stuff. You came here to go to this conference, but you went to Dollywood. You went to Dixie Stampede. And, you could have come just for the conference, but when you mix in some fun with it, it's not an enticement to the kids. What I wanted the young people to understand is being out here separated from your family, from America, it's different, but it's tolerable and it's fun. I mean, we went to the pyramids in Mexico City there, and we had races to run up the pyramids. I never won. And I remember kids absolutely, their lungs were burning because you're at a high altitude, and it was pretty stupid actually. But the fact is, the history that they learned, the things that they saw, the way that they talked, and it's like you said, they found that the mission field was only, when we started going to Mexico City, it was a 4.5-hour plane flight. You could be in Mexico City from Chicago at the same time you can be from Chicago to Los Angeles. So the mission field wasn't or isn't, a 3-month boat ride anymore. It's not that far away. The longest places that, if you want to fly to China or in Africa, you're still 14, 18 hours. It's not that brutal. It took, how long did it take you to drive down here? Too long, all right? From northern Michigan, from the same amount of time it took you to drive to here, you could fly to Ghana. So it's not, let your kids see that the mission field isn't that far away. You get them there. I promise you, if you can teach them to be soul winners, don't just go build a building. Don't just, you go and we, God is my witness. We went with Brother Kevin Wynn for a week long where they did outdoor Bible clubs all over Mexico City, and we worked with him in those services, and 70,000 people were led to Christ. 70,000 in about 7 days, 8 days I think it was. And our kids, I mean, they saw, you know what? I can win people in Chicago, but I can also win them in Mexico City. They get saved too. And it was an amazing revelation for them to see and to experience and to talk to the missionaries' kids, and they like being there. They're excited about where they are. They're happy. They're you know, it's different. Everything's different, but it is not that far away, and it's not this, you know, dry, dusty way of life that it may look to them. I've been to China, and I'll tell you what, it was fascinating to me. I hated the Chinese. They were communists. You know, and when I got there, they're just like us with slanty eyes. They like different kinds of food. Their Chinese food is not American Chinese food, and we need to go show them how to make Chinese food. Okay. It is not good, but it is not that unites us a bit. And we need to bring our kids there and allow them. The last thing on it is first rule that I make before we leave is I tolerate no graping. You're going to a mission field. You don't like the food, shut up and eat it. Okay? You're feeling sick, I don't want anybody to know about it. I don't want to. When I take away that avenue, they can't gripe, they start to like. All right?
That's great. I want to go get some General Tso's chicken now, you know. You know, let me give just two little footnotes to this. One is, you'd be amazed how many international people are in your town. The world has come to us now. No matter where you live, in the smallest towns of America, there are immigrants. One great thing to do to open their eyes without even taking them out of your area is help them find people of a different culture and different background and get acquainted with them. And that's something you could do immediately with very little cost, and it'll awaken some of your young people. Second thing is, and I appreciate what he said about emphasis. You know, when you walk through this college building, this Christian Heritage Center, this is not just something nice to look at. This has a purpose. The pastor's whole vision with this Christian Heritage Center was to bring to life the lives of men and women who've made a real contribution to God's work in this world. And I think if we made more out of great missionary heroes, they would become the heroes of our young people. That's why I love to talk about Borden of Yale and Brainerd, 20-some years old. He's across the hallway. Go look at his display, coughing up blood, missionary to the American Indians, burn out for God, engaged and married to Jonathan Edwards' daughter, Jerusha, and she takes care of him the last months of his life, and he dies before they can get married. And, I mean, you know, just gave himself to the Lord. That kind of thing awakens something in the heart of a young man or young woman, and they think if God could use them, maybe God could use me. And I think we need to go back in history a little bit. Kids don't get history anymore, you know, and we need to teach them what a great heritage we've been handed, and that's something that could be done on a regular basis, and I hope you'll do it. Great question. Something else, great question, and this is a day where there's a lot of scrutiny on churches and religious groups by the media and others and the enemies, and she's asking about safeguards that should be put in place to protect us. But Lady, I want you to speak to this because Brother Lapina serves really as like the administrative person First Baptist Hammond. They have a large ministry, a lot of things going on, but I know they've taken some very, very careful precautions through the years, legally and otherwise, trying to keep things right, and I think he could speak to this best.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. Honestly, I could probably spend 2 hours talking about it because it is the plight of fundamental Baptist movements, anybody. Talking to our principals of our school the other day, we still do corporal punishment in our schools. And we have to be very definite on why and when a child gets spanked. And I talked to Brother David Gibbs about a month ago, and he said, you do understand that is short-lived. He said, there will come a time when, in fact, I think it's Connecticut right now voting to ban corporal punishment even in our homes because it inflicts pain. It's not just bruising, inflicts pain. Well, my dad went past that. And if there wasn't bruising, he retried. And want to get into how my mother spanked, and she was totally radical. She should be in jail, and but it is getting to be a different day and time. Let me just give you a couple quick things without getting too bogged down, and it almost gets to the point of being depressing. But a couple things. First of all, I don't react to situations until I have facts. For instance, a kid comes and says, my dad's abusing me. Well, if I take that to the police right away, it is a huge investigation, and it probably will make the news very shortly because it's such a volatile issue at these days. Quite often I have found that the child has lied. And so there's a lot of questioning by several different people before we take it public, take it to the law. And so I'm very, very thorough, and we very, very cautious. And the pastor is always involved in that because it can become a firestorm. I encourage and teach our kids about what they Facebook and what they put on the internet. It is why God wrote a book, by the way. When you talked about reading is a lost art, you know. And God wrote a book on purpose. Do you know in the Middle East, my wife and I, we enjoy reading on our iPads and also with the Bible being spoken and follow along with it. It just adds a new dimension to it. And I was talking to a man whose mission is to get Bibles into Syria and other places. And I said, why don't you do it electronically? And he said to me, he says, they don't trust electronics. They believe in a book. I thought how ironic in the land where the book was written, and that they want to see a physical book. Anyhow, our kids tend to believe everything that is read, and they put their feelings into texting and into social media. And you will have to stay on not just your children, but your adults as well. Your young couples are the worst. Okay, because for whatever reason, they will get on Facebook late at night when their kids are in bed, and they will talk about their husbands. They will talk about how their child was treated in the church nursery, how their kids were treated in Sunday school, and they think they're just talking to a friend. But you know Facebook, you know how it's infinite. It goes on and on and on. And so one of the biggest dangers you have, that we have, and it's going to really bite us hard, is if we don't teach our folks on what not to put on there. Stop venting. Stop putting your problems on there. Stop talking about your husband on there, your wife on there. Stop talking about your feelings of the day. I don't want to hear about your feelings of the day. I feel happy and like running through a field of poppies. I don't really care about that. You know, tell me about an event in your life or something that's good, but I don't want to see all that. But what happens is, in the privacy of our own little world, we want to put that on social media. And it is taking us by storm. And we're not the only ones that read it. We're not the only ones that look at it. And all of a sudden, all you need to do is get somebody you ticked off in your church. And I don't know if you've ever ticked anybody off in your church, but give it a day, you will. And that person will go on there. He'll see that on your Facebook account, and you know what? He'll take it and he'll run with it because you wrote it down. It's law. So in light of that, I think that is vital to protect yourself. Probably the biggest area that we have worked hard at First Baptist, and I challenge everybody. Brother Gibbs has written numerous articles. You can Google a lot of his articles on it. It's that on physical relationships, child molestation, handling children, our men workers, and even some of our lady workers to a certain age. If it's 4 years of age or older, we don't touch the opposite gender. And we encourage even same gender, no touching. Shake the hand, that's it. The day where you can hug a teenage girl and you can hug a junior high boy and tell him you love him, you know, go to Penn State today. Okay? It is something that will be taken out of context, and we have a no-touch policy in that area. It is, and background checks on our workers to protect us and them, to encourage new folks that are coming in that are children's workers have regular. We have a file with a background check on them. I hate that. I despise it. I don't like it. I wish but it is a day and a time that we live in, and you're going to lose your ministry because of that. He said, well, we didn't do anything wrong. You don't have to. You just have to be accused. You just have to look like you did. I mean, seriously, I don't even tell a lot of the illustrations from my early days as a youth director because it would send the wrong message. I've shot more kids with paintball guns, and I know today I'd be on the front page of the paper. You know, a kid did wrong. I mean, hey, bend over, paintball gun, and I'd go to jail today for that. And you just can't. It was funny then too, but it wasn't. He's just not going to get away with those things. So you got to walk differently today. You got to handle yourself differently. And again, I think I could go on for about 3 or 4 hours on the subject. And Brother David Gibbs has written a lot of articles on protecting yourself, mistakes that a church can make. I guarantee you they'll help you read those things.
That's very helpful. You know, several years ago, Pastor put something in place here that all of our children's workers, anyone working really with minors, there's a program that we make them go through. We usually take a Saturday and do it every few months or every year or two. And everyone's required to go through it, and it's a series of videos they have to watch. And then they sign, that they went through this, and we give them a little certificate they completed this. And that way, if there's ever any question, did we do any training at all with our children's or youth workers before they were allowed to have contact with these young people? And I know y'all do the same thing. I think that's very helpful. A lot of times it's just innocent things, but I remember years and years ago, a youth director, there was an accusation made about him with a young lady, and I remember sitting down and talking to him, and there was nothing to it. There was stupid, just indiscretion, texting back and forth and that kind of thing, and youth directors ought not do that with teenage girls. That's very, very dangerous. And I remember he said to me, well, I just think of her like my daughter. And I said, that's exactly what's wrong. She's not your daughter. She's somebody else's daughter. And there's a reason why in the pastoral epistles, when God addresses the young pastor and says how you're to address those in the congregation, when it comes to younger women, he says, as sisters with all purity. There is a certain distance and discretion between brothers and sisters, right? That's just natural. That's the way it ought to be between youth workers and young people of the opposite sex. There ought to be that distance. And God help us all. I mean, it could be any of us at any time. Yes, sir.
Also in this area, he mentioned the texting and so forth, the letter writing or emailing. You may want to. I never write a teenage girl unless I include I'm third party. In other words, we are writing you. My wife and I think. My wife and I are proud of you. It's never I'm proud of you. It's never I love you. It's never you're doing. You mean a lot to me. It's you mean a lot to us. I challenge our college students. They're terrible at this, and they get a bus kid that just it's knitted their heart to them, and they want to write a letter to this 13-year-old bus kid, and I'm so proud of you. I love you, and so forth. All of a sudden, alcoholic dad picks up that letter, gets that email. Hey, thanks. What's that perverted 19-year-old kid, college kid coming after my 13-year-old for? And I'm going to Channel 7 News. Bus 37-3. We love you. Include other folks in it. I make the statement, I include my wife in all my relationships, okay? And I don't just say to a teenage girl or a young girl in grade school even, I think you're the prettiest girl in this church. I never do that. My wife and I think you're a lovely young lady, to where they don't think it's a personal thing from me. It is an opinion from a collective group of people.
Very wise. Yes, sir. I can get you the information on that, and if you'll email me, I'll have to dig it out. And there are probably others besides the one we use. I don't know if there's a certain program you have, if you developed your own. Good. Dr. Gibbs could recommend lots of programs. To be honest with you, that's who I would contact. I would just ask Dr. Gibbs and CLA.
Google that with for CLA. They'll give you more information than you can possibly need.
Yes, sir. Yes. That's a great question. He's asking about special needs young people. And I have to be honest with you and tell you, we have a burden for special needs young people here. We have not had a lot of that in our youth ministry. We've had a little bit of it in our church with younger children. But it is on the increase, I know, everywhere. Is that something you all have dealt a great deal with?
Yeah, quite a bit. We have even a special needs school at our school, and it's been very unique to where these kids on occasion will go to classes with the other students depending upon their abilities. And what has happened is our high school kids have learned to accept these young people like anybody else and accept their handicaps, and they've really become endeared to the kids. They don't get made fun of. They're just part of them. They come to my high school choir. I've got a blind girl that has a lot of issues and handicapped and so forth, and her brother is a lot of handicaps, but they've been coming for years, and our kids tolerate them and love them very much so and include them. They're just a brother and sister that has some special needs, and so we do our best to intermingle them as much as possible.
We have a ministry in the church that is, we call it the Shepherd's Ministry, and that's the work with all special needs folks. And the way we've chosen to do it is we have a separate Sunday school class, a total separate department for them on Sunday mornings. Now, you may want to intermingle them. I think it's going to depend on what their needs are, how disruptive they are. Your Sunday school department is separate, yes. And that's what we've done because they need individualized attention that they're not going to get if they're just thrown into several hundred people. And it's a great question. I have a friend that is going to school, about to finish graduate work in that area, working with special needs people. He had a burden because one of his children has special needs. And I think we need to pray God would raise up an army of people that feel like that's their calling, their burden in our churches, because it's on the rise. No question. Something else? Yes, ma'am. Well, let me say this. She's asking about raising funds for mission trips and that sort of thing. And I'll let Brother Lapina comment on this as well because they've done a lot of it. The one word of caution I would give you is sometimes youth ministries go crazy with fundraising. It's like they always have something they're selling or doing. And after a while, that gets annoying in a church family because it's like shooting fish in a barrel. They all go to the same people, and it's the same people in the church. And here the pastor's trying to raise money for the building program and, tithe and give your offering. And, oh, by the way, the teenagers are selling this too this week. And what we've tried to do as much as possible is put the burden for fundraising back on the individual young person. We've learned that our teenagers have family members and friends. They have their own circle of connections that if they simply work that, they can oftentimes raise a great deal of money without us doing something church-wide. So, for example, we encourage our young people when we get ready to take a mission trip, for example, and they need to raise funds, we teach them how to do it, and we look at it before we let them put it out. We encourage our young people to write a personal letter that explains their burden and what they're going to do, and then they send a certain number of those letters out to family members and friends. That's been very effective for our teenagers. And we do some things. We've done everything from selling donuts, outside of a Walmart, and kids sign up to sell Krispy Kreme donuts and car washes. We've done all that before, but through the years, and this is just my opinion, I think it gets out of hand in a hurry if you're not careful, especially if you're in a place that has a Christian school, because Christian schools are doing the same thing at the same time, and so you just got to be careful about it. What are some of the things you all do?
We sell bus kids, and so I just you get a hard worker, he'll go for a lot of money. I echo exactly the same thing. In a larger churches, it's really a problem. In larger schools, to where I just made a rule: I'll buy from the first person that calls me, and so it's usually once a candy sale or some kind of sales going on, my phone will ring off the hook. But already bought, and I even lie about it now. But no, I don't. But for a smaller church, I would pick and choose several things that your kids can do, and even some projects that are beneficial to the kids, apart from selling candy or things that need some work projects, to where the kids are cleaning parks or cleaning, find somebody in the church that needs a dirty job done, and we get the kids together and we'll do those dirty jobs or roof tear-offs or things that adults don't like to do, basement cleanouts, and hauling junk away, and you allow these folks to donate to a mission cause or a special trip, trip to conference and so forth, and we'll clean out basements, and you take a couple days throughout the week or Saturday, and you get your kids to do that. But I think if you chart some specific things like that, there's a lot of good ideas from selling candy. That works. People will always buy candy. Talked to Dr. Vineyard's son, who was a salesman for World's Finest Chocolates, and he was at a school, raised $150,000 selling candy. And it all depends what they get around. Brother Bruce Goddard out in California, his youth group, they do car washes. They've got it dialed in to where they'll raise $60,000 selling car washes. I talked to a pastor in Illinois. He's got a guy that's just an amazing guy on the grill with barbecue and so forth. And they go to a booth at the state fair and hit 3 or 4 county fairs and raise $30,000-$40,000 for their missions trip every 2 years. And I think you look at some avenues like that, some unique things that are fun for the kids to get involved in, that can be even of a spiritual nature, because at their booth they give out tracts and information about the church and so forth, and let the people know that the proceeds are going for a missions trip. And you'll have all manner of folks that aren't even good Christians but like a missions trip and like missionaries, and they knew one time, and so they're going to buy your hamburger because they want to support that. You're going to have to look for specific things like that and ideas.
Look, teenagers have money, and they'll find money for whatever they want to do. If you don't believe me, look at their tennis shoes, They've got money. So I think more and more we ought to put the responsibility back on them. If their heart is really in it, they'll work it. I remember years ago we were building the new church auditorium, and we set a goal in the youth department that the teenagers would give a certain amount of money to the building program. I remember when we unveiled the amount of money, those teenagers' faces, it was like, we don't have that kind of money. Well, by the time it was over, we blew way past that number. And I discovered something, and that is young people will work. They do have money. It's a matter of priority. And we have to teach them early on to take responsibility for that kind of thing and be good stewards. Good question. Something else? Yes, ma'am. Sure. It's a good question. A smaller church setting, most of the young people ride the Sunday school buses, and they're in the morning worship service. How do you control them? I'll say this. Usually when young people are out of control, the answer is a very simple one. Now, not always. Sometimes there's a young person that needs to be removed. That happens. And occasionally, you get in a situation where you think we need to have a separate service. Some of these kids aren't ready to be in a church auditorium. We've had some of that. But my experience has been that for the most part, the reason they're not behaving is there's not enough supervision. It's 1 or 2 people trying to corral 10, 12, 15 kids. That doesn't work. If you want young people to behave, to learn to listen, someone has to mentor them. Somebody has to literally teach them how to sit. That sounds so elementary. But most of these kids, they've never sat in a church service in their life. The longest thing they've sat and watched is a 30-minute sitcom, And we've got to teach them how to sit. What do you do with a hymn book? How do you find this book in the Bible? They're intimidated. They're overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. My advice to you would be try to recruit as many people in that church as possible who have a heart for young people, who are interested in helping them. And don't set all the young people together. Split them up. And let a family take a boy. Let a couple take a young lady. Let an older woman take that girl. Sit with them. Work with them. I think in the matter of a few weeks, you'd be amazed the change that would take place. And it's just individual tension. It's the simple things you just keep going back to over and over and over again. I don't know if you have anything you can add to that.
I love that. And, I've challenged our bus captains and bus workers. I went to a Great America with a group years ago. And all of a sudden, a young kid, he's probably a freshman in college, got on the bus. He said, you in charge of the group? I said, yes, sir. He said, I need to read this to your group before they get off. I said, I'll read it. He goes, no, sir, I have to read this. I said, all right. So he read a list of 10 rules that the park has. And one of them was, you wear your ball cap or straight on your head or not at all. And have your shirt on at all times. And a bunch of things that the park expected. One of the kids on my bus happens to be Brian Hassey, our youth director now. He was a teenager. He took his hat and he just went like that just to be funny. And this fella stopped what he's doing. He said, son, he said, I appreciate that. He said, but I'll tell you what, you will not get off this bus and go to the amusement park unless your head is straight right now. Whoop. And the training needs to start on the bus. And I would read the list of rules for the church, how to behave in church, where you're supposed to go before the children get off the bus every Sunday. And I love exactly what you're saying here. Those kids, we brought our bus kids, our teenagers, into the services. We started about 6 months ago. It was pretty rough the first couple Sundays. And but what we do now is anybody new, they go through a training class for about 4 or 5 weeks, and then we send them into the auditorium. And now I'm telling you what, they're participating, they're listening, they're getting to hear the pastor of the church finally. So I love the idea of them going into the service with the pastor. I love that. I preached our B church for 27 years. And I always hated that most of those kids never got to hear Brother Hiles preach, because he only came on Sunday mornings. So we have changed that, and I'm glad we have, but we have gone exactly what Brother Pauley said. A systematic, not enough workers will allow you to cause problems, and training those kids on how to behave.
You know, the beautiful thing, if you do it that way and you do it right, you not only accomplish something for the church service, you actually are building a relationship that can go far beyond that. It's the Titus 2 principle. Older men teach younger men, older women teach younger women, and you're trying to foster that kind of spirit. A boy came up to me yesterday, and he said, look, I don't have a dad. He was in my session on family and building a lifelong friendship with your family. So we talked about his relationship with his mother. And he said, I don't have a dad. He said, what do I do about that? I said, you have any men in your church you respect? Oh, yes, sir. Pastor, youth director, Sunday school teacher, coach? Oh, yes, sir. I said, then start there and build a relationship with them. Look, every boy needs a man to take an interest in him and teach him certain things. Every girl needs a woman. So if they don't have a father or mother doing that, then they need a spiritual father or spiritual mother in the church that takes an interest in them. And that may be a great way to get that started. Look, the best youth workers are not the people with diplomas on their wall from a Bible college. The best youth workers are parents and grandparents who are or have raised their children because they're living it and they have a heart for it. And you've got a resource. They're right in front of you. I remember when I first started working in the youth department, a pastor said to me once, and I won't say the people's names, he said, I want this family to help you in the youth ministry. And I said, excuse me? I said, you talking about? And he said, yeah. And I didn't say this, but I thought, they're old. Old people can't work with young people. Again, I was just stupid. You know what I found out? They were some of the best youth workers we ever had. And the kids loved them. They developed a relationship with them. It was like having their grandma and grandpa on youth activities. But you know what I discovered? Those people are a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and maturity that those kids needed to be around. And so don't reserve it just to your youth workers or your teachers to do that. Get other people involved. All right, any other question here? Yes, sir. Brother Eddie commented on that a little bit this morning in his message. Say just a word about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's a tough decision. There's a lot of talking with parents. We are really doing our best to include our parents involved in the counseling of our young people's lives. In helping a parent to understand the call and the direction of a child, most parents really don't. They want their child to be able to make money so they can support themselves and them in their old age. Okay, that's just it. You want the same thing for your kids too, by the way. All right? You want your kid to be able to, the most panicked I've ever been in my life was when my son was getting married, wondering, did I teach him enough to support a wife? I'm talking about pure panic. And I'm thinking, well, the kid's a hard worker, and I know he has some trades and so forth, but can he do this? That's why the parents want their kid to go to an accredited college and get a degree in engineering and be able to make $200,000 a year, and so he doesn't ever have to struggle, and so all the world will be fine. Well, we know better than that. And when a young person has that tugging of the Holy Spirit and the call of God, parents have to understand what all that means. Well, he's going to go to Bible college, but he's not going to get government loans for that. So how are we going to be able to afford Bible college? Walk the parents through all of that. Show the parents how that child can make money and pay a tuition. Give them illustrations on how you made it through Bible college and God supplied. And teach the parents to step out in faith. Don't just blow them off and say, well, you know what, you're an alcoholic, or you don't go to church anyhow, you're never going to get it. Just tell that kid to go on and forget his mom and dad. Oh, no. This is a great opportunity for you to help that parent see. Every parent wants a kid to fulfill his purpose in life as well. And when I've seen it over and over again, when they see, I watched a dad, had a young lady came to Hiles Anderson, and she was an accomplished violinist. He wanted her to go to another school and a secular college for music and so forth. She played dinner music for a banquet I had, and all of a sudden I see this couple sitting in the back of the room, and I went up, introduced myself, and they said, well, that's our daughter. She's playing here. And I said, you drove all the way from Iowa to see your daughter play? And she goes, yeah. He goes, we spent a boatload of money on violin lessons. We want to see her perform. And you know what? Every time that girl performed somewhere, they came and became very endeared to the ministry. And her and her husband has served 4 years on a missions team in Ghana. And her mom and dad are absolutely thrilled for it. They were Christians, not good ones at that time. They're much better Christians now. But it took a lot of work from us to include them in this child's life in Bible college. That makes sense? I don't know.
It's very helpful. You know, he just articulated the first lesson about youth ministry I was ever taught. The first thing Pastor Sexton ever said to me when I started working with teenagers was this: Scott, if you're going to work with the teenagers of this church, you have to learn to work with their parents. That was very wise. And by the way, give it time. They are well-intentioned people. Look, I had a grandfather that didn't understand that God had called me to preach. He said to me, you should go to college for something else so you have something to fall back on if the preaching thing doesn't work out. And you know what? 15 years later, he stood in a parking lot one night after I preached in a youth rally. He had driven 2 hours to hear me, and he put his arm around me and hugged me, and he said, Scott, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing with your life. Give it time. You know, I was thinking, you remember when the Lord Jesus was 12 years old and he was left in the temple, and Mary and Joseph come back 3 days later, they find him, and what is his response to them? Wished ye not that I must be about my Father's business? Now, if you stop there, you get the idea that he just said, I don't care what you think. But if you read the next verse, he went home with them and was subject unto them. And the Bible says this, but Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. The curtain falls, and it doesn't lift till he's 30 years of age. You know what I believe? I believe that the Lord, our God, was not only preparing his son for the work that he was about to do, I think he was preparing Mary all that time too. Now look, a sword was about to pierce her heart too. She was going to stand at Calvary and let him be crucified. The same God that works in the heart of the teenager can work in the heart of the parents. And we just got to pray and encourage young people to honor their moms and dads and press on. God will work it out in his time. Well, that is a great, great question. And I appreciate all of them. Brother Lapina, I appreciate you being here. I want you to lead us in a prayer and pray for these youth workers, if you will.
Father, I do thank you for your goodness to us. Thank you for these folks who taken other time, taken away time from their ministries, their families, taking vacations, to bring young people to a meeting like this. God, I ask you to bless them for it. Show them some tangible way that you appreciate what they have done. I pray, Holy Spirit, you'll give them a safe journey home. I pray that all their efforts this week will be multiplied just many, many times over the next many years. Bless their families, their marriages. Give them great ministries in the next few years. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.